Olá, amigos e amigas do Agro Connection, estamos chegando ao nosso quarto e derradeiro episódio da série Crop Tour na estrada com Agro Connection e RTC. E para onde que nós vamos agora, Carlos?
Nós estamos indo para Nebraska. Já vou dizer que é um estado que eu não gosto muito porque ele é vermelho, né?
Eu, pelo contrário, já amo, né? Adoro um vermelho. E lá nós vamos então entrevistar um produtor rural na região sudeste de Nebraska.
Exatamente.
E contar para vocês como que está a situação no estado de Nebraska, né, que é um dos principais produtores de soja e milho do cinturão do milho, né?
Exatamente. Uma outra coisa que nós vamos conversando agora na estrada é a questão da irrigação em Nebraska, né, Alexandre? Que é o estado, hoje nos Estados Unidos, que tem a maior área irrigada, tanto para milho quanto para soja, né?
Perfeito. Então fiquem aí, porque depois vem muita novidade.
É isso aí. Pé na estrada, nos vemos em Nebraska. Bom, pessoal, o Alexandre veio me desafiando, né, com um monte de perguntas lá sobre o Kansas. E agora, já que nós estamos dirigindo para Nebraska, eu que pergunto para ti, Alexandre, qual que é a principal característica que diferencia Nebraska aí dos outros estados?
Carlos e amigos e amigas do Agro Connection, a principal característica é a irrigação, né? Como nós comentamos no vídeo anterior, Nebraska é o estado que mais tem irrigação por pivô central nos Estados Unidos. E muito disso se deve ao fato de que na área de Nebraska nós temos o aquífero Ogallala, que é um dos maiores aquíferos do mundo. E o Nebraska tem a sorte, o privilégio de estar em cima desse aquífero, o que permite a irrigação por pivô central. Então, as principais empresas que produzem os equipamentos, né, que a gente vê inclusive no Brasil, são de Nebraska, né? E curiosamente são o nome de cidades de Nebraska, né? Por exemplo, a Henkel, ou a Lindsay, ou até mesmo a Valley, são cidades de lá que tem a produção de pivôs que são exportados.
Perfeito, agora a gente já aprendeu um pouco mais sobre essa questão da irrigação em Nebraska. E se não tiver irrigação, Alexandre, como que é a precipitação dentro do estado? Ela varia assim como no Kansas, de leste a oeste?
Perfeitamente, exatamente da maneira que tu explicaste no primeiro vídeo, né, da série. O estado de Nebraska tem um gradiente bem claro assim com relação à precipitação, né? O leste de Nebraska, ou a região que nós vamos visitar hoje, ela tem aí um regime de 800 milímetros anuais, e conforme a gente vai indo ao oeste, esse gradiente diminui. O pessoal fala que diminui aí 1 inch, ou seja, 25 milímetros de chuva a cada mais ou menos 80 quilômetros.
Mais ou menos
para o oeste. Então a diferença, né, dos cultivos, nós temos a parte central e leste de Nebraska com soja e milho, né, tradicionalmente. E conforme a gente vai para o centro-oeste, né, a região da onde eu geralmente falo dos nossos vídeos, nós já temos a cultura do trigo, né, como protagonista, além do milho irrigado, aí sim, somente irrigado, a soja somente irrigado e o milho de sequeiro.
Muito bem. E como é que é a topografia de Nebraska? Lá no Kansas eu comentei sobre o Flint Hills, né, que é uma região levemente montanhosa, com umas coxilhas bem acentuadas, né, onde se cria bastante gado. E eu sei que Nebraska também cria gado, né? Como que é o relevo da região?
Perfeito. Então, Nebraska tem uns relevos, vamos dizer assim, bem distintos, né? A parte central de Nebraska, que é onde a principal rodovia corta, né, que eu geralmente viajo, se chama o Platte River Valley, ou seja, um vale, né, que corre o Rio da Prata, vamos traduzir aí, e é onde tem as principais áreas de soja e milho. E consequentemente as irrigações.
Que é muito perto de Iowa também, né?
Perfeito, e isso se estende a Iowa. Já nas extremidades, tanto mais ao sul, mas principalmente ao norte de Nebraska, nós temos as Sand Hills, que seriam, vamos traduzir aí, os relevos com áreas mais arenosas, né? Que aí teria mais a parte de gado, que tem bastante gado a pasto, mas a maioria do gado de Nebraska é confinado, né?
Assim como na grande parte dos Estados Unidos.
Perfeito, perfeito.
Ah, mas tu botou nós uma enrascada, né?
Eu não, o GPS ali que te mandou para um lugar que não tava no script, né, cara?
Não tava combinado, olha aqui, né, que nós íamos parar agora.
Mas tudo em prol do conteúdo, né, gurizada? Às vezes a gente cai, pessoal, a gente cai numas ciladas, né? Normal. Onde é que nós estamos, Carlos?
Estamos numa lavagem, cara. Vamos ter que lavar o carro. Hi.
How you doing, sir?
I'll do number 4.
Okay. 872.
Yep.
Is your first time here?
No, actually I have a pass, but not for this car.
Okay. Just a reminder on loading procedures: complete stop first, shift it into neutral, foot off the brake.
Okay, yeah.
Gastando inglês o homem.
You wanna say hi for our friends over there?
Hi, friends. All right, you guys enjoy your wash. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, sir.
Pleasure.
Então agora vamos para a hora da verdade. Vamos limpar esse carro, já que nós caímos numa boca
Braba.
Embarrado. Olá, amigos e amigas do Agro Connection. Então estamos chegando na nossa fase final do Crop Tour na estrada com Agro Connection e RTC. Estamos aqui no estado de Nebraska, mais precisamente na região sudeste, né, perto das fronteiras com Iowa e Missouri. E nós temos hoje o privilégio de entrevistar o produtor rural Daryl Obermeyer. Certo, Carlos?
É isso mesmo. Estamos aqui com o Daryl. Muito obrigado, Daryl, por receber a gente aqui. Thank you very much for having us here.
You're welcome.
E nós estamos aqui depois de mais de 1000 quilômetros, né, Alexandre? A gente deixou o Kansas hoje pela manhã, estamos chegando aqui final da tarde, agora exatamente 7 horas e 45 aqui no estado de Nebraska, para nós finalizar esse tour com um grande produtor aqui que trabalha com muitas coisas, né?
Perfeito, vamos fazer umas perguntas para ele então. Daryl, as Carlos said, thank you very much for having us in your farm. And the first thing I would like to ask you is, how long have you been farming here in your property, and what kind of crops do you use?
I started farming in 1974, and I have a corn, soybean, wheat rotation. I also have livestock. I did have hogs at one time, and I still have poultry and cattle. And I also, so within my rotation, I have cover crops as well to extend the cattle.
That's very interesting. And one question we like to make so the people in Brazil, they can get to know about the soil type here is this more sandy soil in this region? Is this more clay soil?
Right here we have a lot of loam, but this part of Nebraska has more clay than sand. The further you in west you go in Nebraska, you increase the sand content. But right in this area, it's mostly either clay or loam unless you're on a river bottom where there will be sand.
More sandy.
Right. We were talking before, and you mentioned that you don't have any problems with drainage here, but you also mentioned that one of the reasons is because you use cover crops, right?
Well, yeah, since I use cover crops, I've noticed, and some people from the university have joined in with what I do, and the infiltration rates have increased quite a bit over the last several years with cover crops. I find that I have very little runoff anymore, and the soil just dries out better. The water goes ahead and just soaks into the soil rather than sitting on the surface.
Perfect. And well, I'm a soil guy. We could be here talking about soils for hours and hours. But let me ask you about this cropping season. So what's your expectation for this year for your corn and for your soybean?
As far as yields, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Generally on corn, I like to get in the vicinity of 200 bushels per acre. Soybeans, I like to be in the mid 70s or mid 60s, I'm sorry, close to 70. I do occasionally on some of the better soils, I'll get into the 80s on soybean yields. I do double crop too. Following wheat, I plant soybeans. And those yields are more in the vicinity of maybe 40 bushels per acre because they don't get planted until after the 4th of July. So they just don't have the growing time before the days get shorter and the soybeans mature. You know, so they're in the vicinity of just half or a little more of a normal yield.
Okay. So we can see that you are a very diversified farmer. You had corn, soybeans, cover crop, wheat. You mentioned that also beef cattle, right?
Well, so I should mention also I have alfalfa.
There you go.
There you go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my question to you is, what's the main challenge for you to reach higher yields, to keep improving your system? What do you think you need to improve in order to reach all your goals? Let's put it this way.
Well, I think in efficiency, I mean being efficient, and I noticed also with the cover crops, I don't need to use as many inputs to get the same yield. And so I guess it's so much, I'm not trying to increase my yields as much as to make getting those yields more efficient. And since I've started using cover crops, I haven't had to put lime on for years. This type of soil, quite often every 5, 6, 7 years, people have to lime again.
What's the pH around here?
Mine runs in the vicinity of 6.5 to 7, but if you don't lime, you can get, you know, pHs down in around 5 if you don't keep up the lime. But now in my case now, it stays really consistent in the 6.5, 7 range since I've been using since I've been using cover crops. And if you balance that pH, it doesn't seem like you even get the insect pressure. To me, just anecdotally, once you have the pH balance, you just don't have the pests invading you like you do if your crop isn't as healthy. So
in that sense, would you say weeds or insects? What are the main issues in terms of sanity for the crops?
Well, I think as far as the weed competition, I started no-tilling back in the early 80s. And I think no-tilling helps with the weed pressure because you don't stir the soil and bring up the weeds. And so I think the no-tilling helps with the weed pressure, and I think the pH balance seems to me anecdotally to help with the insects.
And while I asked you about the pH, and as I said, I'm soil guys, I'm always curious. So what's the organic matter content around here?
Oh, mine runs 3 to 4% on the farms that I do have cover crops. I do have a couple landlords that don't want cover crops. You know, and there you'll get the organic matter down below 3. But as long as you have the cover crops, you can keep that organic matter up to where, you know, up close to the 4% range.
And if you guys allow me, I'll get my sunglasses here because the sunlight is killing me. But we can keep going.
Yeah, I have a question now that goes more outside of the farmer. Like you mentioned that you have partnerships with the university and the government agencies. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? How long you do that, and how happy you are about doing it?
Well, I've always done a little bit of contact with NRCS and you know, we've always shared some information, but about 5 years ago, they approached me about doing some test plots for them. So for the past 5 years, we've worked together a lot on several different research projects, on different types of cover crops, different maturities of crops, different planting dates and termination dates for the cover crops, and also wheat as well. We're doing research on wheat, and that's with different nitrogen levels and we had different application types, dry and liquid fertilizer for the types on the wheat. And so I've really enjoyed it. You know, I played around with cover crops since the 80s, and I can see things that they do, but I don't have the evidence to back it up. But, you know, when you have the extension as well as the NRCS, you know, then you can get statistical data and they'll go ahead and do the test for me, you know, like the biomass test, the soil infiltration, things that I really haven't tested, but I've noticed. Just it appears to me this is happening. But now with the experts coming down, I can actually through their tests of the soil and from the equipment they have at the university, I can actually find out what really is happening. And some of the things that I thought were happening are, and they prove they are, and some things not as much as I thought. But you know, I like cattle. I like steak. I like a T-bone steak. You know, and I've raised cattle.
Like too, yeah.
I've raised cattle my entire life. I enjoy doing it, and I like the product. But you know, the last 5 or 6 years where I've been doing some of these intensive tests and using cattle to graze all the cover crops, I've also found that the cattle can help cut the expenses too, because you know, they're really the only animal that can take that grass and turn it into an immediately usable fertilizer. And so I've also found another really good use for cattle. I've always run cattle on the corn stalks and you know, on the years that I have cover crops, but I've never had research to back up what those cattle are doing. And so cattle, the ruminant, in the way I farm, the ruminant is an extremely valuable part of my farming system.
Yeah, that's really amazing to hear.
Yeah, that was a good conversation here, and we can just moving gears a little bit right now. So related to your costs. So how much you spend to produce, and is the seed the most expensive part of your production? Is this herbicide? So can you tell us a little bit about your cost for producing here?
I would say the seed is probably the highest cost. Because of the way I farm, I've been able to cut back some on the pesticides, whether it be a herbicide or an insecticide. I've been able to cut back some and have some savings there. But you know, that's the one thing with cover crops that doesn't seem to go down, is you still need to plant the seed.
Yeah. And
in this area, on soybeans, I try to plant about 100,000 seeds per acre. And on the corn, the better soil, maybe about 33,000. And on the hilltops, the side slopes that aren't quite as good as soil, maybe in the vicinity of 27,000, 28,000. And, you know, unlike some parts of the world, we have some very hard winters.
Yes.
And I found even with the temperatures we get, we had our coldest this winter. Of course, we had a lot of snow on the ground. The coldest we had this winter, officially 32 below zero. The brassicas that I planted, a significant percent of them survived the winter.
Wow.
And when the corn was up about knee high, the brassicas were right up there with it, already blooming. And you know, figure 32 below zero, but it had that mat of rye on top of it, and then it had a foot of snow. And also I've noticed, if I can, and I know I'm rambling and going off, but I've noticed with cattle, the cattle don't need hardly any mineral anymore during the winter. I used to have a big cost was the mineral during the winter for the cattle when they were on just corn stalks. And now that I have cover crops about everywhere, the cattle don't hardly eat mineral anymore because they must find it with the cover crops. And I've noticed we've also kind of changed how cattle act. Cattle more with grass stick out their tongue, wrap it around their tongue, and pull the grass in their mouth. But you can go out and look at those brassicas. After those turnips get good and round, they'll just bite them like a goat.
Yeah.
And these cattle are actually learning how to eat like goats to get those brassicas. And they'll dig down through a foot of snow. I hardly feed any hay in the winter anymore, because on those very cold mornings when the cattle used to just be huddled around the hay bale eating, they'll be out digging through the snow. You know, we had one morning wind chill close to 40 below zero. Every cow was out digging through the snow for a cover crop feed.
To find that turn.
They just don't stand by the hay bale anymore. which I think also that exercise of them walking around the field all the time has got to make a healthier animal than just standing bundled up next to a hay bale eating a hay bale all the time.
That's a great point.
And so I think just, you know, the cover crops, the livestock, I mean, you can get everything to work together in a system to where they all need each other.
To be more diversified at the same time,
Yeah.
more sustainable.
Right. Yeah, and in my case,
And efficient.
my system works so much better with cattle than if I didn't have cattle. I mean, there are people that, you know, a friend of mine successfully uses cover crops and doesn't have cattle. He has a tremendous biomass in the spring. You know, his cattle don't pasture down. He's increasing his organic matter, increasing his infiltration, but he doesn't have that other piece of income, you know, that I have with cattle.
Don't have the T-bones.
And he doesn't get the free, he doesn't get the free fertilizer that I get by having cattle. But cover crops work great without livestock, but they just work fantastic with livestock.
That's
Amazing.
great.
Amazing. I think our audience will really enjoy this
okay.
conversation because in Brazil we have very similar similar topics that we talk about, like this integration of livestock and crops.
Yeah.
It's a hot topic right now there as well. So that would be very nice.
Well, a lot of our politicians want us to eliminate cattle off the face of the earth, but I think it's because they're not looking at science. They're looking at pop culture maybe, and not looking at science and not looking at what the ruminant, how valuable the ruminant is to this earth, and the value. It's basically just a gift to Mother Nature to have a ruminant, to be able, the only animal that can take that grass and turn it into something valuable. Yeah, and so it's just, you can see how Mother Nature just works together, and we got to figure out a way to put them all together, and I'm getting close, but I don't know that I don't think I'm there yet, but I've been able to make things work together as an entire system.
Outstanding.
You're definitely, closer than others for sure. Trying to increase your efficiency, nitrogen use efficiency, water use efficiency, carbon use efficiency, and with the cover crops and the cattle grazing off that during the winter, for sure you're more close. You're closer than others for sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I hope so.
Thank you very much.
Então a gente agradece mais uma vez ao produtor Daryl Obermeyer por essa excelente entrevista, valiosíssima. Esperamos que todos vocês tenham gostado, né, Carlos? E vamos seguir a estrada porque ainda temos alguns quilômetros até voltarmos de volta.
Até chegar em casa, né?
Chegar em casa, exatamente.
É isso mesmo. Gente, nós vamos ficando por aqui com o nosso Crop Tour 2021 na estrada com o Agro Connection e a RTC. A gente espera que vocês tenham gostado e fiquem atentos porque no mês que vem tem mais um Crop Tour com essa parceria incrível, trazendo a voz de produtores americanos para vocês conhecerem a realidade e também, obviamente, verem a condição das lavouras de milho e soja aqui do meio oeste americano, que com certeza influencia muito os preços e também muito mais, né, lá no Brasil, Alexandre.
É isso aí, então vocês já sabem, continuem nos acompanhando e como é que a gente encerra?
Stay tuned!